Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and all my bags are packed. I'm ready to go. Taxi, or in this case Noah's outside, honking his horn. Already, I'm so lonesome I could read, because I am leaving on a jet plane back to Phoenix today. So like me, comment for me, view me like you'll never unsubscribe. It's the Canterbury Tales Tag Part 2, Mancipal, Merchant, and Plowman for you. Lots of books, so let's jump in. Now this tag, of course, was created by the fantastic AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. They have a great channel. I was kindly tagged by Brian over at Bookish, who did have the great idea to split this into two parts. So, the return trip. Prompt 14, the Mancipal. Bonus points to anybody who knows what a Mancipal is. Mancipal provides the food. Recommend a series you think is good from the first book to the last. Well, one that jumps to mind, seriously, great trilogy is the Underworld USA trilogy by James Ellroy. It starts with American Tabloid, but I've got the Cold 6000 and Bloods a Rover right here. This is one of my all-time favorite series. It's one I read and reread. But one other one that I don't mention too often, and there are obvious issues with the character, but the character is meant as deep satire, is the Flashman series by George MacDonald Fraser. Flashman exhibits all sorts of the monstrous aspects of the Victorian gentleman. So we've got Flashman at the Charge, Flashman and the Angel of the Lord. That's John Brown. So that's a great, fascinating historical fiction series. Prompt 15, The Merchant. Deals in furs and cloth and is powerful and wealthy. Recommend a book with a powerful message or theme. How about A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry? Great drama. The film adaptation is fantastic with young Sidney Poitier. But the play itself is a great depiction of one specific aspect of the realities of segregation and the idea of redline and segregated housing in the U.S. And this is just a fantastic play. Hansberry, unfortunately, sadly died so young and had such a brilliant mind and voice to share. So that's worth checking out. Prompt 16, The Shipman is a wine-stealing rascal. Would have been a great prompt for that naughty character, a response for that naughty character prompt on the last one. Actually, Flashman would have been as well. But here we go. Tell us about a side character who steals the spotlight. One of my favorite side characters and one of my favorite novels would be the great Eponine in Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. Definitely in the novel, fascinating character, a really interesting, poignant character that I think people just gravitated towards because when the musical was created, that part certainly expanded in some very interesting ways and just has a fantastic song in the musical as well. So that would be one, and sort of the way that character has legitimately stolen the spotlight within the larger narrative of a wonderful novel. But another one that I'd like to mention would of course be Caddy Compson in William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, in part because she's a character who's not a narrator. We don't get her stream of consciousness, or in Jason Compson's case, sewer of consciousness. But Caddy, as a character, just exerts such an influence over her three brothers in a way that is fascinating and horrifying in equal parts. But she's certainly a character who is stealing the spotlight, despite never actually her voice, being there for us. Prompt 17, The Physician knows what ails you and can cure it. Tell us about a book you consider a comfort read. Most of Agatha Christie, # March Mystery Madness. There's just so many. I love the Hercule Poirot novels. That's sort of where I, started with Christie, but there are so many other books she has as well that I've enjoyed. Let's go in. Prompt 18, The Franklin is not a vassal or noble. Actually, a Franklin, bonus points to anybody who knows what a Franklin does. Is not a vassal or noble, but a free man. Recommend a book about freedom in any form. If you've never explored this, Testament of Hope, the Essential Writings and Speeches of Martin Luther King Jr., great work. And these can be found, usually public libraries have these. You can probably find a used copy online for under $10. So this is just a fantastic work, and one that looks at his religious messages, but also his civil rights work, and then even his anti-war work against opposing the Vietnam War. Really fantastic work. Another one, sort of freedom from perhaps tradition, would be Lucretius with The Nature of Things. I have it in this Stoic and Epicurean Philosophers Modern Library edition, but there are plenty of editions of Lucretius out there and his famous concept of the swerve. So let's swerve over to the Reeve. Prompt 19, the Reeve is believable on the outside, but lies on the inside. What book was different than what the cover led you to believe? Now, these are two books that I think the cover didn't quite let me know just how wonderful they were. I didn't want to be a downer on this one. So one would be Downbelow Station by C.J. Cherryh. Now, this cover's okay. I mean, science fiction covers have a tendency to be just like mediocre in general. But there's nothing in there to tell you that this is one of the best science fiction books ever written, that this is a book that is just filled with fascinating characters, fascinating factions and ideas pitted against each other. This kicked off Cherryh's great Alliance Union series. And this is just one of truly the finest science fiction novels ever written. And there's just no sensation of that on this old dot paperback. But another one, again, that I think is better than its cover indicates would be The Wrong Case by James Crumley. I originally picked this up years ago because it was a vintage contemporary and I could see the spines and I love these. But I'd never heard of James Crumley. And honestly, this cover was not particularly interesting. Like, what the heck is this mousetrap with a heart pillow and then the alcohol and the revolver at the nightstand? That was kind of a clue. But the central aspect of this cover is ridiculous. And this is a great crime novel. It's what I consider Mountain West noir, which is a very interesting way where you're not in necessarily cities. You're not in cities at night, with the rain and that sense of noir that we often think of. You're out in these wide open spaces, and that the alienation that can exist there is profound. And so James Crumley is one of my favorite writers. That cover does not do him justice either. Now, prompt 20, The Plowman is a good-hearted and faithful. What book do you read over and over again? Well, why not the Canterbury Tales? There are a few clunkers in here, but overall I think these are fantastic. As with the Decameron, not necessarily the Arabian Nights, in part because so many were added on years and years later. It'd be like if somebody tried to go in and fill out the rest of the unfinished Canterbury Tales. Everybody was supposed to tell multiple tales, journey there, journey back. We have just a fraction of what Chaucer could theoretically have created to complete the work. And I'm kind of glad nobody's ever gone back and tried to make up, the other Knight's Tale, the other Manciple's Tale. What we have is wonderful. So I enjoy this work. All right. Prompt 21. The Guildsmen are 5 men who act as a unit and stand for brotherhood or sisterhood. Recommend a book with a strong ensemble cast of characters. Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy by John le Carré kicks off the Carla trilogy with George Smiley. But this is a really interesting book. We have George Smiley as our main sort of spy, who's not necessarily, this isn't a book filled with action. It's a slow burn. It's a chess match with people as pawns. And le Carré allows us to get into that, to get into the heads of the people playing the match, but to realize what the human sacrifice and the human cost and toll is in those spy games, and just how awful those can be. But in order to do that, he allows those pawns to become people again as characters in here, and it works startlingly well. Peter Gwilym is fascinating. There's Ricky Tarr. There's just so many different characters. The different, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Poor Man, Beggarman. Those sort of codes from the rhyme for the different characters within the Cambridge circus of MI6. It just works wonderfully well. Another one that is fascinating would be Peter Mathiessen's Shadow Country. Peter Mathiessen's one of my favorite writers. He had written a trilogy of books focusing on this Edgar Watson historical person, and exploring the first one sort of explored all these different people telling what had happened to Watson, and this he was sort of a monster of a character. I think Thomas Sutpen, except in 1900s Florida. And then the second book dealt with two of his sons, sort of their reconciliation with each other and with the memory of their father. And then the final book then focused on Watson himself as sort of this first-person narrator. What he did then years later was take all of those, re-edit them, revise, really go in and emphasize different aspects and emphasize, again, the realities of what was happening racism in the U.S., in the southern U.S., in the late 19th century, early 20th century, very effectively, and to give more voice to characters who were black, or who were had black and white ancestors, very effectively. And this book is amazing. It was a very justified National Book Award winner, and kicked off my adulthood obsession with all things Peter Matthiessen. So, one other one, a Canterbury Tales sort of I don't want to say parody, Pastiche Hyperion by Dan Simmons. The structure of it was sort of taken from the Canterbury Tales, and has these different characters traveling to this mysterious, planet where there's this fascinating religious figure, the Shrike, that people sort of make pilgrimages even though they don't fully understand what's going on, and it seems quite horrifying. And then he continued that with Fall of Hyperion, Endymion, Rise of Endymion, and it's filled with references to John Keats and other writers, but the Canterbury Tales are present there if you read closely. So those are all wonderful. Prompt 22, the cook makes the food that feeds you. Tell us a book that feeds your soul. I feel like that for me is essays. This is getting into the mind of wonderful thinkers and writers. So Michael de Montaigne, and certainly Virginia Woolf. When I had done my library tour with Wolfe, I hadn't found volume 4 of her essays yet. I have that now. Working a little bit closer on that entry of the Mookes and Gripes bucket list. Prompt 23, the yeoman serves you. Tell us about a book that served its purpose, that did what you wanted it to do. Wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. About Congo by Michael Crichton. It's a perfectly adequate book. I don't know, is it better than the film adaptation, or is it worse than the film adaptation? Like the fact that I can't decide that, the answer to that question, probably says everything about why this book should be in this prompt. This is an earlier novel from Crichton, and it has his focus on science and technology, interesting ideas around animal behavior. But it's not as strange and weird as the film is, although it also might not be quite as terrible as the film is. So, prompt 24, the second nun talks about a saint's life in her tale. What book do you praise often? I don't know that I've praised it too much here, but I certainly praise it among my friends and people I talk to who read. That would be Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. I really think the Book of the New Sun series that he wrote could be the response about the Manspool as well. It's a great series. And Shadow of the Torturer just drops us in and slowly reveals just how there's these little glimmers of how our narrator, Severian, might be an unreliable narrator. And there's just so many fascinating ways in which he does world building, but also character building. And he does that very effectively. I think that's sometimes a spectrum that people, science fiction and fantasy writers, fall pretty heavily onto one or the other. And Wolfe balances it very well. All right, finally, prompt 25. The Nuns Priest is witty, doesn't take himself too seriously. Neither do I. Recommend a book that has a funny or witty main character. Rabelais, Gargantua and Pantagruel. This specific translation from Samuel Putnam is a very, very good translation. I think it's only available in old used copies of the Viking Portable Library Edition. It's not a complete translation of Gargantua and Pantagruel, and there's not a huge scholarly apparatus with a bunch of notes, but in terms of capturing just how funny Rabelais can be, I think the Putnam translation is maybe the best. And I've been reading this with our daughters at night, and our younger daughter just loves it. She calls it the Red Book by the Funny Man, with the jokes. That's how she refers to this book. She's working on saying Rabelais. So, prompt 26, tag some BookTube pilgrims. Well, hopefully I'm on a safe flight back. And one of these pilgrims already did the tag. But I'm going to tag the Falcon. I'm going to tag Greg over at Another Bibliophile Reads. I'm going to tag Mark at Book Time with Elvis. I hope he's doing well. I'm going to tag the Grim Reader, who has recently unlocked the community posts. And then I'll tag Summer from Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats, because Jordan Parsons got to jump on the pilgrimage. Anyways, I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll see you later.